In the course of these many years of ministry, I have come to the conclusion that each and every one of us has our own spirituality, our own favorite prayers that maybe we say once a week, maybe every day. Our favorite little books. I see people walking around sometimes with little frayed books that have been used, obviously used. Pages are falling out. Well, I'm the same way. Most priests have a traditional way of praying every day. We call it the breviary. But in the month of June, I decided to make my own suggestion to my own self, to my own spirituality, without getting any permission from anybody, to drop my regular prayers, to drop my daily morning, evening prayer from the breviary. And I decided to just pray the 150 Psalms from the Old Testament for the whole month of June. Now, praying the Old Testament is a difficult thing for all of us. And I don't particularly run off to the Old Testament too often to pray because it is a difficult several books to zero in on this God because the God of the Old Testament in some ways is so different than the God of the New Testament. And so, as I say, it was difficult keeping my resolution and praying the 150 Psalms. And I tried to figure out when I was the end of June and I finished the 150 Psalms, what did I take away from it? And after giving it some thought, I kind of realized how the Jewish people in their relationship with God were really, really in touch with their God. Now, they goofed up an awful lot, but they were really present to the presence of God in their lives. That's why they wear the yarmulke. It's not just a decoration. And I got this right from a rabbi's mouth. He says, we wear the yarmulke to help us to realize that God is over us and that God is always present. Beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's what I gleaned from praying the 150 Psalms during June. Because it's been one of my challenges, a very difficult challenge to kind of be present to God's presence in my life. I don't know about you. You see, we just sang a responsorial psalm. If you hear God's voice, harden not your hearts. You can't hear God's voice if the TV's blaring all day. You can't hear God's voice when you're driving down 215 if the radio's going full blast so the guy next other lane can hear it. We got to give ourselves moments of silence. We got to take it serious for many reasons. I don't know about you, but we live in a fragmented world. I watch a lot of news. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. A psychiatrist friend of mine says, Father Joe, at your age, you should not be watching so much news. And I know what she meant. We live in a fragmented world, and we have to have an anchor. And for those of all of us, that's why we're here today, because we have something in common. We have a God, and we got to get in touch with that God. Like the Jewish people, they were always in their weaknesses, in their sinfulness, in their fragmentation, they were always in touch with Yahweh. I tried very difficult. I try in a most difficult way to realize that God is always present in my life. Not easy. It's not easy. This past summer, I had two wonderful opportunities to help me to realize how God is present in other people's lives and how God can be present in my life, how I can recognize God's presence in my life. In an article in June in the issue of America magazine, put out by the great Jesuit order, Bishop John Dolan of the Diocese of Phoenix, new bishop, thank God for that new bishop. The other one, I think, is in purgatory. Bishop John Dolan of the Diocese of Phoenix opened his heart and shared in a very, very painful way something that we don't like to talk about if it's in our family. Things that we kind of lock up into the closet and lock that door and not let anybody else know about it. But he opened himself in this magazine that's read all over the world in different languages about something that happened in his life. Manifested pain and sorrow. But eventually, he shared an action on how to deal with the tragedy that happened in his life. He said, and I quote, "Yes, I am a bishop, but before anything else, I am a human being who understands severe toll of mental illness, especially when it is left untreated." End of quote. Then he went on to share, and as I read that article, I was imagining tears in his eyes. He shared the experience firsthand, the pains of mental illness in his own family, having lost 4 members of his family through suicide. 4 members of his family through suicide. His brother Tom, his sisters Mary and Therese, and his brother-in-law Joe. How difficult it must have been. There had to be something else there besides this beautiful human being. And I kind of surmise it was the presence of God that he's in touch with. He also mentioned, quote, "The truth is that I had to survive these losses early, very early in my life, and the church was the only comfort for me. I relied heavily on the prayers and the love and the concern, the spiritual outreach of so many of my friends. And this personal experience led this new bishop, he's a bishop only 2 years now in Phoenix, led this new bishop to establish an office of mental health ministry in the Diocese of Phoenix. The sharing of his story, his openness, his kindness, his compassion, his hurt, his fragmentation, proved to me that you can do these things if you're in touch with God. And that bishop, whether he said it or not, is in touch, is present to the presence of God in his life. Now, I share with you another example. But let me preface this first of all. I'm a little embarrassed because it's about my family. And I share it with you not because it's my family, but because it was so obvious to me how God is present in the muddiness of life. There's nothing exceptional about my family. We are as neurotic as any other family in this building. In fact, I think we have a unique neurosis. I call it the Anesian neurosis, and we all share it. We have our faults, we have our limitations, we have our anger, we have our selfishness, just like every other family on the planet. So don't leave the church this morning and say, "Oh, Father Joe thinks his family is pretty good." No, I think my family is pretty neurotic, just like yours. But let me tell you something, what I experienced. I spent a week with my sister Pat. Pat is 2 years younger than I am. We're the only two left out of 11. About 4 years ago, my sister Pat had to have a hip surgery. And the anesthesiologist decided to give her an epidural. Everything went wrong. Anesthesiologist did not hit the mark. So Pat hasn't walked for 4 years. She has to be catheterized every day. She's slipping into dementia. One of her children, Joan, who is now 62, moved back in to take care of her mother. So there's Joan, there's Pat, and there's Pat's husband of 64 years of marriage, Richie, ministering to this woman. 64 years of marriage. God could not, in his mightiness, give us a better brother-in-law. Dedicated man. The total focus of these three people is constantly ministering to Patricia in whatever way she is in need. I observed how this team works together. I observed how the love and the dedication and the caring and the compassion overrides all their faults as human beings. And I attribute that to the presence of God in their lives. Their world is small. It is occasionally the hospital. It is occasionally the emergency room. It's changing sheets, changing adult diapers every day. The challenge of getting Pat in and out of her bed every day, into her wheelchair, making sure she's not hurt, doing laundry virtually every day, making sure she is given her meds and making sure she takes them, showering her, making sure that she still has her dignity. The total focus of that day, of each day, is on Pat. Their world is very, very small. Once in a while, they jump into the van that they had specially made and drive up the New England coast on the beautiful days, New Hampshire, Maine. Stop for some good New England clam chowder, cup of coffee, just to keep Pat happy, to divert her attention from her discomfort. It was a pleasant visit that 1 week with Pat. She was good humor most of the time. She is grateful for what her husband and her daughter and sometimes one of her boys come in and give a helping hand. On sunny days, we sit outside under the Chrisman maple tree. We talk about memories. She doesn't remember too much, but it's a lot of humor. There's no negativity I noticed. No negativity. No complaining. Why me? No blaming God or life. Nothing like, why me? Everyone is especially giving, tired, but persevering. Always looking forward to Sunday morning when the Eucharistic minister comes with the Blessed Sacrament. Yes, God is present in that family. in spite of the fragmentation of that family. And they're in touch with it. Pat is always looks nice and neat and clean. Joni goes out once in a while, buys her a new pair of slacks or a blouse, whatever. Sometimes Pat talks. Sometimes she's inexplicably silent. All of a sudden, she'll start giggling over something, and we don't know what she's giggling about. Sometimes we don't know what's going on in her mind. I taught her a little card game, very simple little card game. I made up for her. And she looked at me and she said, "You're not going to cheat, are you?" She just stares at me, and I send her flowers once a month. That perks her up, gladdens her spirit. And I assure her, I said, "Pat, you died before me. Don't expect any flowers from me. You're getting them now." And she looks at me, kind of gives me that evil eye that Italians know how to give. And she points her finger at me. After sharing dinner with them each evening, I return to my motel. Before I go to sleep, I find myself thanking God for God's presence in that family, and thanking God that they, maybe even inadvertently, are in touch with the God in their lives, present to the presence of God in their lives, which helps them and enables them to minister to their wife, their mother. The family is far from perfect, but the love of God and the dedication and the care clouds all those human weaknesses. If we get in touch with the presence of God in our lives, God is all around us, my brothers and sisters. I don't know what people do who don't believe in God. That's our anchor. And a more concrete anchor is the Son of God, Jesus Christ, present, as we just heard in the gospel, present. God is all around us in the joy and in the laughter, in the ugliness of life, in the pain, in the happiness, the frustrations. God is always present among us when we cannot find answers to the many questions that we have. This God, this very mysterious God, always present. We just got to open our eyes. And so let us pray. Gracious Creator, present among us, you have renewed the face of the earth. Your people sing you a new song, announcing your presence always in our lives. Through the Virgin Mary, you have brought forth a new birth in our world. Through your miracles, you have brought forth a new power. Through your suffering, you have brought forth new patience. And in your resurrection, you have brought forth new hope. And in your ascension, you have brought forth a new majesty. Amen.